Well, again, I want to welcome you here with us this morning. If you're just visiting with us for the first time today, we've been taking a look at the book of 2 Timothy. And don't worry if you feel like immediately, then I'm going to be lost. You won't be. Each week stands on its own. But just a little recap, as we look at the book of 2 Timothy, I find it very important to always look at, where did this come from? And obviously the book of Timothy is a letter. And this letter came from the Apostle Paul to a young pastor by the name of Timothy. And he was trying to encourage Timothy. And often as we look through the letter, it doesn't always seem like words of encouragement. But they were meant to encourage. But Paul was writing this from a very dark place. But a place where even though it was dark, he was trying to offer hope and life. Because see, this is the very last letter that Paul ever wrote. He was sitting in a prison and knowing that this time he was probably never going to get out. And it was true, he never did. He was facing his death very soon. And so does that matter when we look at somebody's writing? I think it does. Because what might we write if we knew that the end of our life was coming soon? What might we portray if that were the case? And may we say things that we, in other times of our life, wouldn't. Because maybe in other times of our life, we would kind of live, I hate to say it, but in a sense, carelessly, because we don't think tomorrow is coming, or we don't think any end is near, and we're good. But Paul knew that it was different. And so as he goes through this letter, he is encouraging Timothy, but he's also encouraging him through warning. Now, I know that sometimes that can be hard, because how can you encourage somebody and build somebody up and lift them up by warning them? Well, that's what I always find so unique and different about the Bible, maybe than our culture today, is because we don't find warning as a sense of encouragement. And yet in the Bible, even Jesus himself warned as a way of encouraging. I don't know if any of you, maybe some of you know this verse, maybe some of you have never seen it before, but when Jesus was talking to his disciples about how his death was coming near and how things were going to change, and he knew that his disciples were going to be horrified by what they were about to see, and he knew there was no way he could explain to them that he would be arrested and that he would be beaten and that he would hang on a cross. And he knew this would rattle their world. And in that last conversation in the book of John with these disciples, these are the words of Jesus. I just want to remind you of this before we go into Timothy. Jesus said this. He said, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace." And this is what he told them. You will have suffering in this world. But as soon as Jesus says that, he says, but be courageous. Be courageous. It's kind of like, here's the warning. Don't think that life is going to be perfect. Don't think it's going to be great because you follow God, because you follow me. Don't think that's going to make life wonderful. In this world, you will have suffering. But be courageous. Why? Because Jesus said, I have conquered the world. And you see, that's what Jesus did on the cross, is he conquered sin and death and hell, so that anyone who would come to him and give him their life, he would give them the gift of salvation, the hope of eternity. And as much as that promise is beautiful and wonderful, it does not mean that until we come to that day, we sang when we all get to heaven, what a day that will be. When we all get there, may not be tomorrow, but it might be. I don't know. Jesus himself said that he doesn't know the day, only the Father knows the day that he will return. But what Jesus was trying to say is, listen, as long as you live in this world, you will suffer in this world, but don't get discouraged. I've conquered the world. So as we go back to 2 Timothy, I say that, and I lead off with that because it may seem like Timothy is going to get a little dark, maybe for a moment. But sadly, I think that if I read this list in our culture today, it wouldn't be dark. So today we're going to take some time on just a few verses, because Timothy is going to begin to reflect on what the last days look like, what culture will be like in those days. And he begins to lay this out to Timothy. So starting in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1, Paul says, "But know this." He says, Timothy, I want you to hold on to this. This is what I want you to know. Hard times will come in the last day. Hard times will come. It's not going to be great. It's not going to be wonderful. You got to figure Timothy's sitting there going, my mentor, my friend is sitting in prison. I may never see him again. His life is coming to an end, and he's encouraging me to keep on preaching the gospel, keep on delivering the word when I might be next. Really, that's where Timothy was. If I keep up this message, am I going to be next? Am I going to be in Paul's position? What will they do to me? And Paul knew that Timothy was afraid of this. And so Paul is encouraging him by saying, listen, Timothy, I know in the last days, hard times will come. So some of you, and I know many get stuck on this, what are the last days? Well, I can tell you that for centuries, people have thought they were in the last days. Different things throughout history have come. Biblically, though, and if I had time, I would show it to you, the last days began at Pentecost, when the church was born. That's when the last days began. You're like, that's a long time ago. Yep, clear back in the book of Acts. Those are the last days. They began right there. And until Jesus' return, we are in the last days. So what am I saying? This list and what Paul is about to tell Timothy was relevant in Timothy's day. But I think as we begin to go through this, we're going to see how relevant it is in ours. But as he warns Timothy of this, he said, listen, in those last days, hard times are going to come. I love that because I've shared this with you and I'll say it again. If you look in the Old Testament, you have the Hebrew. If you look in the New Testament, you have the Greek. And what I love about those languages is one word holds so many more meanings, okay? And so in the Greek, this word hard, or in some versions, they will pull the word perilous from it. It is only used 2 other times in the New Testament in this fashion. And I find that unique because when we think about this in respect to our last days, the list that as Paul is going to begin to describe what those days look like, if we look at that word hard or perilous, it is only used in reference one time to relate to a raging out of control sea or river. So if you can picture that, seeing a river, it's kind of hard to picture right now in Northeast Ohio. We are so dry. Our water levels are low. But if you can imagine a raging river, that the water is out of control, that is where you see this word. One other time you see it, and this one could rattle some people. You're like, what? That's in the Bible? Is when Jesus encounters animals that are possessed with demons. And it says they are wild and they are savage. And the word here, hard, perilous, was used in relation to those animals that were possessed with demons. So do you see how this word is being used, meaning this is a time that is out of control. It is a time that the world will be in absolute chaos. Does anybody feel like our world's in a little bit of chaos right now? Am I the only one? You're all looking at me like, oh no, what's wrong with you, Pastor Jennifer? It seems fine to me. Really? I don't know, because I think I see a little chaos. So, in this fashion, Paul begins. And he begins to give Timothy a description of culture, the human condition at this time. And I'm going to read through the verses, and then hang on. We're going to go back and we're going to break it all down, okay? Because Paul does something that, I at times say that I don't want to get too specific because I might not hit your button, and I'll let the Holy Spirit hit you right where you are, because I'm not here to do his job. But Paul gets very blunt. And I'm just going to let him say what culture is, and I'm going to expound on that, okay? So in chapter 3, verse 2, he says, hard times are going to come in these last days, for people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, proud, demeaning, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, without love for what is good, traitors, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to the form of godliness, but denying its power. That's a mouthful, isn't it? This is going to be culture in the last days. This is going to be the human condition in the last days. This is what it's going to look like, Timothy. And I'm warning you, it's going to be hard. It's going to be perilous. It is not going to be easy. But I also want you to understand that as Paul is giving this message to Timothy, he was also warning Timothy that, listen, this is not only going to be the culture in the world, but it's also going to flow right inside the church, right among God's people. So watch out for this, Timothy. This is the mindset. This is what will be there. So I want us to break that down. And as I do, I just want to caution you. Because I think what is really easy for every single one of us to do when we look at a list like this is instantly have somebody else in mind. Or is that only my problem? You can immediately think of somebody else who has that problem. Today, I want you to do your best, even if that happens, because I know that's human nature. We can see it here, and we can see it here, and we can see it here. If that's what you do, I want you to pause and say, God, is that evident in my life? God, am I holding that in my heart? So as we begin, lovers of self. Lovers of self. I mean, that one's kind of self-explanatory, I think, for many of us. But this has been around since the beginning of time. It's a natural human thing. As a child, we think of ourselves. It's all about me in the world. And we do everything because we love ourselves more than others. It's no wonder Jesus says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Because he's saying you need to put others as equal with you. But do we see that in our culture? Or is everybody pretty self-centered and all about what works for me because they love themselves the best? I've also seen this as an area in our culture where the devil has attacked it. And now we don't even know what truly loving ourselves is. I've met a lot of people that don't love themselves at all. They just hate everything about themselves. This has become such a mess in our culture of loving self. You've got the ones that love themselves way too much, and then you have the ones who don't love themselves at all, and they go out and do horrible things because they don't care about themselves. And I go, God didn't mean for it to be either direction. Because, see, if we would have a love of God, and I've said this before, and see who God designed and created us to be, then I begin to realize that I might have my flaws and all of my imperfections, but God made me, designed me, and has a plan for me. That's what we're to have. But instead, we live in a culture where everybody loves themselves. There is no thought of God. Oh, next. Lovers of money. Do we see that in our culture at all? Where money is at the root of every problem we have? You know, that's the one thing in the Bible that it says money is the root of all what? Evil. Why do you think that is? It's what drives people. It's what gives people power. Last week we talked about what Paul was telling Timothy to pursue. He said, Timothy, this is what you need to pursue. And in that list, he said righteousness, meaning right living. You need to pursue righteousness, Timothy. And you need to pursue your faith, growing in your faith. And you need to pursue love, Timothy. And you need to pursue peace, meaning peace with others. Timothy, that's what you pursue. But now when we look at this, lovers of money, how many do you know pursue money more than anything in life? It's where we are. And quite frankly, it's kind of how we drive our children too. You know, grow up, go to college, do the best you can to make the most money in the world, right? And with money, we see power. And we see it driving so many things around our world. It's who has the money, and when you have the money, you have the control. But the problem is that when we are pursuing money, can we possibly pursue God? Yeah. Jesus said no man can serve two masters. And if money is your master, then God isn't. So in the end days, people are going to love themselves. They're going to be lovers of money. And lovers of money can fall into many, many other things, even right down into our own life. I read a story about how in the early 90s, And there was, and I was relatively young, not to make anybody feel old, but I was relatively young in the early 90s. But there was a woman by the name, and some of you may know the name, Brenda Blackman. And this maybe brings it a little more home. She had a book that she wrote, and she gave classes, like taught classes on this and seminars on this, about how you are to marry rich. That was her theory. And of course, you can imagine she had mainly women that were in her class. And I love this because this was a chant that she always had her class chanting. So they would chant, I want to be rich. I deserve to be rich. I am rich. I was born to be rich. And that's what they would chant in the class. As the story goes in the article that was written on her, a woman in her class came up to her afterwards and said, well, say I meet this man and he is the perfect man. He checks every single box of what I'm looking for, but he only makes $100,000 a year. Now remember, this is the early 90s, okay? $100,000 was worth a little more in the early 90s than it is now, okay? But I think even now it's considered a decent amount of money a year, right? But this woman posed this question, but he only makes $100,000 a year. Is that enough? Is that good enough? And this woman's response was, no way. No way. She just drove all of these women that you've got to marry rich, and if they don't have enough money, you don't marry them. And some of the women would challenge her, but what if I can't, they just aren't a good fit for me? And she goes, oh, you'll learn to love them when you have money. Interestingly, this woman was not married. Go figure, right? Right? But see, that love of money can start to even get a little more personal when we think of what does that mean to us and what are we willing to do for it? How important is this in our life? I want to warn you that some of you know that I do a lot of funerals and have deemed me the funeral pastor. And I've not seen one person take any of their money with them. Just a thought. And if you think you can control how somebody's spending your money once you're gone, I do a lot of funerals. Do you know how ugly some of the families are? And it's always about the money. Yeah. So whatever you think you're pursuing in this life, listen, you can't take it to the next. If I were you, I'd make the next life your priority. Just little advice. Next, boastful, proud, demeaning. Well, we don't know anybody in this world who likes to boast themselves up, do we? Likes to talk about themselves and everything that they're good at and everything they can accomplish. Yeah. I don't know. I think that's what social media is for, isn't it? To tout how wonderful we are and look what we just did and what we just accomplished. That's why I don't like social media. It's why I'm not personally on it. Because everybody's got to be better than everybody else and tout, this is what I did and look at this and check this out and I'm this and I'm that. I told you, we've got all of these lovely selfie pictures. They don't look like that. They just know how to twist their phone, take off 50 pounds. It's great. It's not real. But we all want to boast ourselves up. We're all better than we are, and we all want to talk about it. And I love how it says, that we're boastful, we're proud, and we're demeaning. I find it interesting that those three end up right in a row, boastful, proud, and demeaning, because you know what? That demeaning comes in when we need to tear somebody else down in order to build ourselves up. And every time somebody's boasting about themselves, they end up inserting how they're better than somebody else and end up tearing somebody else down. But this list is about the world, right? None of that ends up filtering into the church, does it? Yeah, it's not supposed to be there. He says, listen, this is culture. It's going to be hard. People are going to be boastful, proud, demeaning. They're going to be acting as if they are the most important person in the world and better than everybody else. Yeah. Next, disobedient to parents. I know. All of our kids are going to be sitting in the room going, no, I'm not. And all of the older people are going to be going, what is wrong with kids today? Right? I found it interesting that one commentator pointed out that there has been a rapid decline of respect for parental authority since the 1960s. I wasn't born then. It's not a new problem, is my point. But more and more and more, I think we do see a tear down clear across the board. If you watch TV, if you have never watched it, pick up some kids programs that are geared towards children, okay? I love, the Disney Network, and they've got all these programs with all these little kids running around, and they smart off to their parents, and their parents are stupid and dumb, and listen, our culture is teaching our children how to treat their parents. And if you think you're putting your kids in front of something good for them, well then, if you're surprised at how they talk to you, duh. Because our culture is pushing it on them every day. And it's this breakdown, and you think, oh, okay, well, mine are teenagers. What's wrong with their mouth? Well, trust me, there's a whole lot geared towards them, too, of how to talk to their parents. And that's the world we live in. And we can't discipline, we can't this, we can't that. And trust me, it's a cultural movement. Do we see evidence of that in our church? Disobedient parents. Well, he goes on, and he goes, unthankful, unholy, unloving, and irreconcilable, meaning that completely unforgiving. Do we live in a culture where people are unthankful? I think so. You know why? Because nobody has enough. We live in a culture where it is just never enough. I always say when people are so caught up in their woe is me and my life isn't, and I just, and they can't see all the good things that God has done for them. And I'm like, go to a children's hospital somewhere. Take the focus off yourself just a little bit. Like your life just isn't that bad. But we can just wallow in it, and we're just not thankful for anything. And he throws that in there with unholy and unloving. Do you know what the unloving means in the Greek in this context? It means there is an unnatural lack of family love. That's what the unloving means in this term. Is we're living in a way that is just downright unnatural. We don't value the relationships around us. We don't value the people in our lives because we are so focused on ourselves. We find no need to be thankful because life just isn't the way we want it. The people in our lives are only there and only revolve around us because of how they affect us. And you think that some of us might be able to, and I'm going to pick on you kids for a little bit, because I know you all think that, your parents and your grandparents are just here to serve you and do what you want and be there for you. But you know what? I'm a pastor of a church, and I think sometimes people come to church for what church can do for them and never think about what they can do for the church. So how in the world can we fault our children for being obsessed in their own little worlds, where life must revolve around them and nobody knows how hard it is, and I love you all. I do. But the problem is we act the same way as adults, so how dare we criticize them? When we just begin to think that it's all about me and we're unthankful and we're unforgiving and we don't care about anybody else. We're selfish. Can we see that in the culture around us? I do. I see a whole culture full of people that are unthankful and unforgiving and ugly. And yet, this warning for Timothy was, Timothy, it's going to end up right where you are. Selfish, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, irreconcilable. Next, slanderers. Oh, do I even need to explain this one? Do we not see this every day in politics? Every day. Slander. Slander is one of the most ugly things because you know what it is? It means that I can tell a lie about somebody and now they can spend the next 10 years or whatever of their life trying to defend themselves against the lie I just said about them. And that's where we are in culture today, if you haven't noticed. And with media and of every kind, whether it's on the TV or on the internet, it's constant. Somebody else accusing somebody else of something, coming up with a narrative, coming up with a story. Slander. It's ugly and it's mean. And certainly the church wouldn't have any part of that world, would we? You know what I know is really easy to do? Is you start watching the news and And you start hearing all the stories and all the accusations, and you know what we get to do? We get to pick which one we want to believe. We get to decide which one we believe is true and which one is slander. And we take sides and we pit against each other, and it's okay to tell a lie. You know, I've told my husband this often. I said, I'm not worried about getting in trouble for something I actually do, but I do fear a false accusation in the world we live in. And I don't know if you've ever felt like that. But it's not because of what I'm afraid of doing, but I'm afraid of what somebody might accuse me of doing. Because we live in a world where we can just tear somebody else apart who thinks or acts or behaves or believes differently than we do, and it's okay. Paul wrote this how many years ago? You know, Paul wrote this in a time where, I think I mentioned this before, Nero was not far off of lighting fire to all of the poor communities throughout Rome and then accusing the Christians of being the ones who did it. And because he accused the Christians of doing it, everybody was okay with burning the Christians on the street corners. And it was all based on a lie. We have to be careful. The slander is so easy. And you know, in a world, now I'm going to defend you kids, okay? I got your back. Half of the bullying in our schools is slander. It's called, we can go on social media or we can go in these places and we can spread a lie. We can even come up with a picture of them that's not real. And we can run with a lie and we destroy each other. And so adults, if you think that you can somehow handle this, understand our kids are living with it full force. And it's dangerous. And it's why our kids harm themselves in some fashion because of a lie that was told about them, and they have no idea how to get past the lie. Slander is an ugly, ugly thing. And we see it rampant in our culture today. Without self-control. Oh, there's a good one. We see addiction of all kinds at an all-time high, don't we? We don't have any self-control. And it's easy because we can pinpoint it, and we can all say that you know, drugs, alcohol, you know, those things are wrong, and when they control your life and they own you. But listen, there are a lot of other addictions that are out there, a lot of other areas where we show no constraint. We have no self-control. I know I often throw this one in there. You want to talk about drugs, you want to talk about alcohol, let's talk about food. A lot of people show absolutely no constraint when it comes to food. And we need to control that one as much as we need to control the others. But then it goes even further. We have, you know, what is it? With no self-control. How many of us have a problem with our tongues? You got complete control of what comes out of your mouth? I know some people that have their whole life been very shy and very quiet, and they have no problem controlling their tongue because they struggle just even speaking. But good for them. Now the internet, you can type it and you don't even have to say it, and it's all out there. Listen, your tongue can speak without you actually speaking. But don't worry, if you like to speak, I hear there are things like TikTok where you can put out little blurbs and tell everybody what you think. With no constraint, with no self-control. We don't control our tongues. Oh, how about spending? You know, again, another article from the 90s. I'm so glad we fixed all these problems in the 90s, and in 2025 we don't have them anymore. But in the 90s, there was a very well-known journalist who talked about the fact that in the LA Times, about the fact that she had multiple credit cards that she kept hidden from her husband. And she said that, you know, she just dreaded the day he ever found them. And when asked why she had all these credit cards, she goes, listen, I deserve to have expensive suits and expensive shoes, and I like to shop. And he doesn't have any right to judge me or tell me what to do in that fashion. And no constraint over her spending, her shopping. See, no self-control. I could stand here forever and give a list of where we lack self-control, but I'll let the Holy Spirit do that. Keeps going. Brutal. Interesting. We go from, slanders without self-control to brutal. Do we see brutality in the world we live in today? I was sitting there and I was studying this. I got stuck on it. Because I thought, you know what? If you think of brutality and you think of the world around us and you think of war is brutal, right? War is ugly. But now, how do we explain a man standing up on a train and stabbing another woman in the neck and walking off like nothing ever happened? How do I explain that? What I say is brutal is one human being does something to another human being, just completely unjustified because of an opinion or a belief or just because it felt like it. That's brutal. And as I paced and as I thought on this and as I thought on our culture of how we're doing this, I then get a call that a young man's life was taken in front of 1,000 people. And seriously, if you turn on the TV, you know who I'm talking about. And quite frankly, what I'm going to say right now is I don't care what your opinion is about what he did or what his ministry or what his life was. He is a human being. He is a human being. And God forbid the church become part of an argument where we decide that based on what we believe and what we think of a person, if it's okay, if harm comes to them. We live in a brutal and wicked world where people don't care how they harm children. We don't care how many people we sell across the markets around the world. I mean, what is wrong with us? And God forbid this enter into the church where suddenly we have opinions and we dehumanize people based on our morals, our beliefs. Brutal. When it becomes against each other, person to person. He goes on, without love for what is good. Without love for what is good. There are probably just way too many of these instances in culture. Where do I begin? We don't love what is good and right. We let politics and everything else tell us what is good and right. And don't worry, because they'll put now moral issues on the ballot box and we all get to vote on it. Because that's where our moral issues belong, right? Is in the ballots? Well, we'll make laws on what's right and wrong. Let me tell you something. If you base your morals on what politics do, then I'm going to tell you, you need to get back to the Bible. Because God has his ways, God has his laws, and he doesn't care what man deems as right and wrong. But too often in this culture, it's, you want to know what Paul calls that? He says it's without love of what is truly good. You don't love good, you love whatever suits you in the here and the now. Traitors, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure. He's like, they're going to be those who are just seeking whatever it is that makes them happy. There are no rules, there are no obligations, there are no boundaries. Every man does what is right in his own eyes. The Bible says it over and over and over again. So when we look at this and we think they're traitors and they're reckless and conceited, they love pleasure. Nobody cares about anybody but themselves, and there are no rules. I do what I want. And the more culture rises up and the more people fight, the more we all take our stand of, it's about me and I'm going to have my say. The problem is when we seek after the pleasures that are of the flesh, we're seeking after the things of the world. And when this passage says they are lovers of pleasure, let me tell you something. Following God doesn't mean there is no pleasure in life. Following God is one of the greatest pleasures you will ever find. Following after what is good and what is true and what is right. But there is a world that is pulling after us and dragging us down to follow these pleasures that satisfy us in the moment. But let me tell you, they will leave you empty every time. Only God. Last but not least, holding a form of godliness, but denying its power. That's where it gets real. You might think that Paul was telling Timothy, this is the world around you, Timothy. This is what he says, no, Timothy, it's even going to be in your church. It's going to be people who claim they love God, and they're going to hold on to some form of godliness. It's going to be there, but it's just a portion of it. They deny its power. What does it mean they deny its power? Meaning they deny the power of God ruling and reigning over their life. They do not give their life in full surrender to him and let him have control of it. One commentator worded it this way. He says that our faith in God, that godliness is not a salad bar. We don't pick and choose what we want on our salad and we leave the rest because we don't like it. You following me? That is not what faith in God looks like. That is not following him and surrendering our lives to him. Does it mean we're going to get it perfect all the time? No. No, we're not. But what Paul is talking about is he's like, Timothy, there are going to be those that they have a form of godliness. It's a form of it. Kind of looks good on the surface, but get to the heart of it, Timothy. It's not there. It's not real. Where was Timothy going to find that? Right inside the church. Right inside where the people of God were. And he's saying, Timothy, I'm warning you. Be careful. There are going to be those who you think are godly, but look deeper, Timothy. Because if you see these things evident, these are the things of the world. These are against God. So as time is running out, and some of you are looking at your watch, what do we do with this list? What do we do with it? Is it relevant today? Can you all agree with me? Do we see this today? Yeah. So what does Paul say? Well, Paul goes on, and he says, avoid these people. Avoid them. For among them are those who worm their way into households and deceive gullible women, overwhelmed by sins and led astray by a variety of passions, always learning and never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. Avoid them. Avoid culture? How in the world do we do that? Avoid the world we live in? How do we do that? You know, I've said this before, and I'm going to make this clear. The Bible says that we are to be in the world, but not of the world. And for too long in the church, I've grown up here, okay? For too long in the church, being in the world but not of the world, we've put on material things, whether it's how we dress, or, like women didn't wear pants to church, like never. Like women didn't wear pants. Some churches, women didn't wear jewelry, didn't wear makeup. There were all these rules, and this is how we were in the world but not of the world, is because we looked different. And let me tell you something. It's really easy to look different. If it was that simple, how great would that be? We could just change the way we dress. Okay, it might be a little weird and we might get made fun of, but if we could just change the way we dress, we're good. But being in the world and of the world, let me tell you, has nothing to do with the way you dress. It has everything to do with the way you live. Do you hear me? And so when he says avoid these people, he's not saying avoid the people, but avoid what they are all about. Avoid what's going to happen. And he says, because listen, they will worm their way into your households. They will deceive you. All of these attitudes, all of these actions have a way of worming right into our own lives. And in a world of constant information all the time, it's so easy to have it happen to every single one of us, where we begin to have these behaviors in our life. As we watch the news, as we look on social media, as we're out driving on the roads and people are crazy and I just don't care and people are dumb and it's all about me now. Just everywhere we go, it's so easy to become this. And Paul said, listen, watch out, because it's going to worm its way right in there, Timothy. Be careful that you don't begin to look just like the rest of the world. Don't do it, Timothy. And then he says, listen, is it going to deceive gullible women? Some of you are instantly like offended. Culture at that time was the men were busy and the men were working and the women were primarily at home all the time. And what Paul was saying, that the women, not only were they at home, but they were uneducated. They didn't understand things, okay? Because the women weren't allowed to have the education the men had. And so what Paul is saying is, listen, these women are naive. They have a lot of idle time. And they can easily be tricked and fooled into these things, and it will worm its way right in. And many of the men were trying to figure out, like, I'm losing my wife. Now she's believing all of this. So how do we fast forward that to 2025? First of all, idle time can be dangerous. Because idle time, we will fill ourselves with a whole lot of nonsense that we don't need to have, and a whole lot of opinions we don't need to have, and we will do things that we shouldn't be doing. Be careful with idle time. And this is for every single age bracket in this room. And then be careful with what you don't know or you do not understand. I don't know about you, but I do not understand everything going on in the world around us. I don't know about you, but I don't know what truth is at every crossroad. But God has given me a brain, and God has given me his Holy Spirit to guide and direct me. And so he's saying, listen, they're going to be deceived. Don't be deceived. Watch out for this. He says, this group here that is open to all of this, they are always learning, but they're never able to come to the knowledge of truth. Church, God forbid that be where the church of God sits today. And I don't mean the church of God here. I'm meaning the church around the world. I don't care what name is over the door. God forbid that the people of God be the people who are always learning something, but never see the truth of how this reflects in their own life. God forbid. Stay away from it all. Be cautious of it. Watch out. Church, I don't know where you are this morning. I don't know, maybe the Holy Spirit has already pinpointed one of these areas in your life that you didn't even realize you had fallen prey to. You know, it's so easy to see the world around us. But when it's in our own hearts and in our own lives, will we see it? Will we recognize it? Will we humble ourselves before God and say, God, please, I have gone the way of the world far too long. And it's empty, and it's meant to destroy me. God, help me to live on truth. God, help me to be who I'm meant to be in you. In closing, we're going to sing just a couple verses of that song I sang at the end. I do wait, and I do long for the day in one hand where Jesus does return, and he ends all the wrong that we see in this world. And yet Scripture tells us that Jesus doesn't come because he's waiting for each one to have an opportunity to come to him. And I just pray that today, if you're here and you don't know him, you haven't given your heart to him, do it today. But church, as we look at the culture around us, how can we step aside and say, God, please help us to stand out differently. God, please help us to shine our light in a world that so desperately needs you. The last verse of this song says that, you know what, as that day approaches, I need to make sure that my heart is right. I need to make sure I'm ready. I don't know where you are today, but our altars are here. Lay it all out to the Lord. Would you stand with me?